She begged him not to look. He looked anyway. And what he found beneath the bandages turned healing into horror, and a simple act of mercy into something no man should have ever touched. The girl was already sitting on the cot when he stepped into the tent, still straight-backed, bandages wrapped around her face like a mask. Her hands were folded in her lap, unmoving, and though the edges of her clothes were singed, darkened with soot and ash, she barely looked injured at all. But there was a tremble in her voice that the doctor wouldn't forget for the rest of his life. "Please don't take off my bandages," she said. Dr. Abram Wyatt didn't answer at first. He simply stepped inside and let the flap fall behind him, sealing out the wind that screamed across the open plains. The medic tent rustled around them, canvas flapping against the wooden frame, but the girl didn't flinch. She just sat there, young, maybe 17, wrapped in gauze and silence. "I can't treat what I can't see," he said at last. His voice was low even, not cruel, not impatient, just tired. It had been 3 days since the fire tore through Cedar Pass, and this girl, Caroline Fletcher, the sheriff's niece, hadn't spoken a word until now. She arrived unconscious, carried on a broken door by 2 blood-soaked ranch hands who hadn't stopped shaking since. They said she was found alone. Everyone else in the Fletcher homestead was gone. Caroline turned her head slowly toward him, the gauze around her jaw yellowed from smoke and time. Her eyes were the only thing visible, deep hazel, wide, afraid. "You'll wish you hadn't," she said. Abram felt that line cut deeper than it should have. He'd seen all kinds of wounds in his time, arrowheads in ribs, fever boils burst open like fruit, half a man carried in from the hills with nothing but a belt holding his insides together. But this girl wasn't bleeding. She wasn't moaning. She was warning. Still, he was the only doctor left in 3 towns, and he had a duty. "Let me help you." Caroline looked down at her hands. They were too still, not clenched in pain or even twitching from nerves, just waiting. "You can try," she whispered, "but I won't be the one who pays for it." He moved slowly, pulling the stool up close. He could hear the men outside, shoveling ash from what used to be Main Street. Somewhere nearby a horse cried out, half mad from the burns. Abram tried not to think about it. Instead, he focused on the knots at the back of her head, fingers gentle. The first layer came off damp, stained with soot. The smell of smoke was thick, too thick. He'd expected the acrid tang of infection, of scorched skin, maybe blood, but there was something else now, something colder. He paused. "Did someone else try to treat you before you got here?" Caroline said nothing. Her gaze didn't shift. Her lips, beneath the next layer of cloth, didn't move. Abram peeled back another strip. That's when the temperature in the tent seemed to drop. His breath fogged faintly in the air. The oil lantern on the wall sputtered for just a second. It wasn't possible. But his hands kept working, trained on the task. It wasn't until the 5th bandage fell away that he realized something was wrong, truly, impossibly wrong. Her skin wasn't burned. It wasn't there at all. Where flesh should have been, there was something else, something black and moving beneath the surface, like veins of shadow pulsing just beneath a fragile layer of ice. It shimmered, shifted, whispered. Yes, it whispered. He recoiled, almost falling off the stool. "What?" Caroline didn't move. "I told you," she said softly, "you'll wish you hadn't." The shadows beneath her face were still shifting, curling and uncurling like tendrils underwater. There were no wounds, no muscle, no blood, just that slow, terrible motion. He stood up, knocking over the stool. This isn't natural, this is." "Wrong," she finished. She looked up at him then, and in the dim light of the tent, Abram saw that her eyes weren't hazel anymore. They had turned dark, endless, like the bottom of a well. He staggered back. Outside, the wind screamed louder. "What happened to you?" She blinked slowly. "Something old." Abram's hands were trembling. He backed toward the tent flap, eyes still locked on the girl. I need to get someone." "They won't see it," she said. "Only you do, that's the rule." He froze. "What rule?" "The one I broke," she whispered. "The one that saved me." Then she stood, slowly, quietly. The cot creaked beneath her, but she didn't wobble, didn't limp, didn't act like someone whose entire face had been wrapped for 3 days. "The others tried too," she said. Back at the house, my uncle, the ranch hands, even the preacher, they all thought they could fix it. She stepped toward him. They're all gone now. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream, but something rooted him in place. The darkness beneath her skin was no longer passive. It was reaching, pushing against the edges of her form like it was trying to get out. "Why me?" he croaked. "Because you're the last one left who thinks he can help." The tent flap burst open. Sheriff Porter stood in the light, rifle in hand, eyes wide. "Doctor, what's going on in here? I've heard." He stopped mid-sentence, eyes landing on Caroline. "Lord above." But his expression didn't change, not the way Abram expected, not horror, not fear. Just pity. "She's still alive," the sheriff whispered. Abram spun. "You see it too." But Sheriff Porter didn't answer. He looked down. Then he stepped inside, closed the flap behind him. "She told you not to look," he said quietly. Caroline's head turned slightly. "You knew," Abram said. "You knew what she was." "She ain't a what?" Porter snapped. "She's a girl who tried to save her family, and now—" He trailed off. Caroline sat again. The shadows settled beneath her skin like coals under ash. "Now what?" Abram asked. The sheriff's jaw tensed. His grip on the rifle tightened. "Now you have a choice." Abram looked at Caroline, then at Porter. "What choice?" Porter didn't answer. He raised the rifle slowly, pointed it at the girl. "Sheriff, what are you doing?" "Ending it." Caroline didn't flinch. "You'll burn too," she said. "If you pull that trigger, you saw it, didn't you? You all saw it." Porter's hands shook. "I don't care anymore." Abram stepped forward. "Wait, just wait. There has to be another way. We don't even know what it is, what she is." "She's cursed," Porter snapped, and curses spread. He was crying now, quiet, angry tears. Caroline looked at Abram one last time. "I didn't ask to be saved," she said, "but you did it anyway." Then she closed her eyes. Porter pulled the trigger. The flash lit the tent like lightning. And then everything went black. There was no sound, no smoke, no gunfire, no flame, just stillness. A vast, aching silence that didn't feel like quiet, no, it felt like absence. Like the world had stepped out for a moment and left Abram Wyatt alone inside a hollow shell of everything he'd ever known. His ears rang, his eyes burned. The tent around him hadn't collapsed. The cot still stood. The lantern still flickered weakly against the canvas wall. But where Sheriff Porter had been, there was now only a scattering of ash on the floor, fine and pale as snow. His rifle was still there, clattering onto the boards, its barrel blackened at the tip. Abram stared at it, heart beating so hard it felt like it might crack a rib. Caroline was gone. Not dead. Not missing. Just not there. He took a step back, nearly stumbling over the stool he'd knocked over earlier. His breath came in ragged gasps, lungs begging for air that felt too thin. He reached for the tent flap and shoved it open, staggering into the morning light. But outside, nothing was right. The camp was frozen, not with ice, but with stillness. Every man, every horse, every shovel mid-strike stopped. A man pouring water had the bucket still tipped, but the stream hung motionless in the air like glass. A bird overhead had its wings spread wide, suspended in the sky without motion. The world had paused. He spun in a circle, panic blooming like wildfire in his chest. "Help," he shouted. "Someone please." But the words felt muffled, like they'd been dropped into water. Nothing answered. Nothing moved. Then from behind him, a whisper. "You look too long." He turned. Caroline stood just inside the tent, the bandages completely gone. Her skin wasn't skin. It was shadow shaped into something that only resembled a girl. Her hair curled like smoke over her shoulders. Her fingers shimmered, translucent and wrong. But her eyes were still hers. Hazel, sad, tired. "What is this?" Abram gasped. "What's happening to them?" "Time won't hold still forever," she said, "but it slows down when it senses a tear." A tear. She stepped out of the tent, her bare feet not touching the ground, not really. The grass beneath her blackened slightly with every step, only to heal itself moments later. "It's like pulling a thread from your coat," she said. "One little tug, and everything starts to come undone." "You're saying you did this?" "No," she turned to look at him fully now. "You did when you took off the last bandage." Abram shook his head, heart thundering. "I didn't know. How could I have known?" "That's the thing about warnings, doctor. They only work when someone listens." Her voice wasn't cruel, it was calm, patient, wounded. He pressed both hands to his head, trying to understand, trying to wake up. This had to be a fever dream, a shock hallucination. He'd seen it before, soldiers after battle, women after childbirth, minds breaking under too much loss. But this was no break. This was something else. "You said others tried," he whispered. "The preacher, your uncle, what happened to them?" She didn't answer, not directly. Instead, she turned and pointed toward the ridge beyond the camp, the hills that sloped into the edge of the forest, where smoke still curled from the remains of the Fletcher homestead. "If you want answers," she said, "you'll have to walk into what's left. You'll come with me." She looked down. "I can't go back there, not again." "Why?" "Because that's where it started." He didn't know why he listened. Maybe it was guilt, maybe the wrong kind of bravery, or maybe he just needed to believe there was something he could do, some way to make this right, even if the road led straight into darkness. He saddled the horse that stood frozen near the well, muscles stiff as stone, and as soon as he touched the reins, the world began to stir again. The bucket poured, the men groaned, a shovel clanged, life rewinding itself. But the sheriff was gone. No one noticed his absence. Not at first. Abram rode hard toward the ridge. The sun arced overhead and the wind picked up, dry and sharp. Caroline didn't follow. When he looked back once, she was standing on the edge of the camp, her shadow cast too long behind her, watching. The Fletcher place had been large once, a proud ranch house of timber and stone, with acres of pasture, stables, and smokehouses. Now it was little more than a blackened skeleton. He dismounted at the gate, which hung crooked and scorched. The ground crunched under his boots, ash and bone. There were no crows, no scavengers, nothing alive. He stepped inside the remains of the main house, coughing on the thick smell of old fire. Charred beams jutted out like ribs from the broken spine of the roof. The hearth was nothing but cracked stone. But something waited for him. A mark burned into the floor beneath where the cot used to be, a black circle, ringed with symbols he couldn't read. And at its center, a small handprint, smaller than Caroline's. She wasn't the only one. He spun. The voice belonged to a man standing by what used to be the staircase, gaunt, skin tight to the bone, eyes fever bright. "Who are you?" "Name S. Corbin Detcher. I was the preacher here, before it all came apart." He stepped into the light, revealing a burn across his neck, red, raw, shaped like fingers. "I saw what she carried. I tried to save her." "What was it?" Abram asked. "What did she bring back?" Corbin's eyes filled with something like pity. "Not a what, a who." He pointed to the mark on the floor. "Her brother." Abram froze. "But the report said." "He died," Corbin said. "In the barn. Fire started there. No one got to him in time, but Caroline, she didn't accept that." The preacher walked slowly around the room, his limp dragging in the ash. "She went back that night, after the flames had cooled, dug through the ruin with her bare hands, found what was left, and then she asked." "Asked who?" Corbin turned, face bleak. "She didn't know the name, but the thing heard her anyway." He gestured to the circle. It answered, gave her what she wanted, brought him back. But it wasn't really him. "No," Corbin whispered, "it never is." Abram's knees nearly gave. He looked down at the black circle, the charred handprint at its center. How small it was, how delicate. "And the bandages." "To hold it in," Corbin said. "She thought if she could hide the truth long enough it would fade, that maybe the boy would return in full, but the mask started cracking." "Why didn't you stop her?" The preacher's voice broke. "I tried." He pulled back the collar of his shirt, revealing the full mark of the burn across his chest, shaped like a handprint, only far too long, too thin, fingers that wrapped from collarbone to rib. I tried and it punished me. Where is the brother now? Corbin didn't answer. Not with words. He simply turned and pointed toward the barn. Or what was left of it. Half the roof had caved in, smoke still clung to the timber. Abram walked slowly, each step dragging. The preacher remained at the house, eyes full of quiet regret. Inside the barn, the air was colder. Much colder. He pushed the broken door aside and stepped in. There was something moving in the far stall, small, hunched, breathing shallow. A child. Dark-haired, face buried in folded arms, rocking slightly. "Hello," Abram called gently. The rocking stopped. Then the boy raised his head. It was a boy, no more than 9, but his eyes, no, they weren't a child's eyes. They were pitch black. Endless. And smiling. "You're not supposed to be here," the boy said. Abram stepped back. "You're her brother." "Not quite." The boy rose slowly to his feet, joints creaking like dry branches. "But she tried, didn't she? That's what matters. She loved me enough to break the world." The smile widened. "And now someone has to pay the toll." The barn door slammed shut behind him. Abram spun toward the door, his pulse thundering in his ears, but the plank wood held fast. No latch, no lock, nothing he could see. But it wouldn't open, not with a weight behind it, like something enormous leaned on the other side, invisible and unmoving. The light filtering through the slats dimmed. What had been a late afternoon glow now faded to a dull steel gray, casting long shadows over the collapsed barn walls. Behind him, the boy, no, the thing in the boy's shape, took another slow step forward. There was something off about his movements. Not just the stiffness of bone or the weight of possession, but a disjointedness, like a puppet mimicking a child's walk without ever having seen one firsthand. "You should have stayed with her," the boy said, voice lilting, soft, unnatural. "She trusted you. That's rare, you know." Abram swallowed hard, his throat dry. The air in the barn was colder than it had any right to be. His breath fogged. Somewhere under the ruined beams, frost had started to gather in patches along the floorboards. "I didn't come to hurt her," Abram said, voice low. The boy smiled again, too wide, teeth too straight, lips pulled just a little too far across his cheeks. "No, doctor, but you came to see, and that's all it takes." He stepped closer. "Every time someone looks, it opens the door a little wider." Abram stepped back until his spine hit the stall's edge. His fingers brushed a pitchfork half buried in hay, and he wrapped them around it out of instinct. Wood worn smooth, iron cold. He raised it between them. "Whatever you are, you're not staying here. You're not real, not in this world." The boy tilted his head, as if examining a curious animal. "And yet here I am, all because one girl couldn't say goodbye." The shadows behind the child twisted, slithering up the walls like vines. They didn't stretch in line with the dimming light. They moved of their own accord, pulsing gently like they breathed. "You want to fix things?" the boy asked. "Go back, pretend you never saw what's under her skin." Abram didn't answer. "Then I'll give you a gift." The boy raised his hand and snapped 2 fingers. And the barn changed. The cold vanished. The light returned. The beams above whole again, golden sunlight pouring through the rafters like honey. The frost melted, evaporated. The air warmed. And there, standing in the center of the barn, was Caroline. Whole. Unbandaged. Smiling. She wore a pale blue dress, clean and unburnt, the kind a girl might wear to church on a spring Sunday. Her hair was brushed, falling in soft curls down her back. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright with life. "This is what you want, isn't it?" the boy said, now somewhere behind Abram. "This version, this lie." Caroline took a step forward, arms outstretched. "Doctor," she said, voice soft and warm, "you can stay, we can all stay." But Abram didn't move. Because her feet didn't touch the floor. And her shadow. There wasn't one. Behind her, the light passed through like smoke. "This isn't real," he whispered. The child's voice answered from the rafters now. "Neither is regret, but you feel it all the same." The world shimmered again. Gone were the beams, the golden light, the warmth. Back came the cold. The dark, and Caroline's voice, now behind him, shaking. You weren't supposed to see. He turned. She stood in the corner, bandages half unraveled. Her hands trembled. I begged you, she whispered. I begged you not to take them off. Abram reached out, heart splitting in his chest. I didn't know, Caroline. I swear to you I didn't know. You looked anyway, she said. And now he has your name. The boy stepped forward again. This time, the shadows peeled off him like old skin, revealing something far older than a child underneath. Its form wavered, tall, thin, faceless. An outline of a man made of smoke and hunger, eyes hollow, chest glowing faintly like coals deep in a fire pit. I needed a door, it said, voice now echoing with weight. And you held it open. Abram raised the pitchfork, but it rusted in his hands within seconds, flaking into dust. You can't fight what you never understood, the thing said. Caroline closed her eyes. Please forgive me, she whispered. Then she stepped forward. Into the thing. And everything shattered. He woke up in the middle of the town square. No tent, no horse, no Caroline. But people were moving again. Busy. Loud. Alive. Dust swept down the street in small twisters. Someone hammered boards over a broken saloon window. A dog barked at chickens running beneath a wagon. And Abram Wyatt sat up in the dirt, shirt torn, hands shaking. Doctor, a voice called. He looked up. It was Harlan the blacksmith, thick arms, burned apron, familiar face. You all right there? Took a fall or something? Abram looked around. Nothing was scorched. No bodies, no smoke, no sign of Caroline or Sheriff Porter, just life. He began, then stopped. You sure you're okay? Harlan asked again. Ain't like you to lay around in the dust. Abram stood, brushing his coat. The world felt reset. But something was wrong. A note out of tune. He couldn't name it, but it made the hairs on his arms rise. Where's the sheriff? He asked. Harlan scratched his head. Sheriff, don't have one since January. You been drinking, Doc. And Caroline Fletcher. Who? That made Abram's blood run cold. The girl, the one from the fire. Harlan frowned deeper. What fire? The sky overhead was bright blue, not a cloud in sight. The trees stood tall beyond the ridge. The town bustled. But none of it made sense. He turned toward the ridge, the Fletcher homestead. Nothing but green hills now. No ruins. No ash. Something happened, Abram said under his breath. Something did happen. He walked through town like a man possessed. Faces he recognized turned to watch. Smiles, hellos, confused glances, but none of them remembered. The past had been swept clean, not buried. Erased. He found his medical tent near the edge of town, right where he'd left it. Inside it was quiet, orderly, bandages rolled, tinctures labeled, cot made. And on the stool by the cot, where she'd first sat, was a bundle. Wrapped in fresh gauze. No blood. No soot. Just bandages. And beneath them a note. Please don't take them off again. His hands shook. He sat. He stared at the bundle, afraid to touch it. She's gone, he whispered, or worse. Then something moved. Not outside. Not in the tent. Inside him. A twitch, a chill, a pressure behind the eyes like someone watching from behind his own gaze. He stood slowly, moving toward the mirror above the wash basin. He looked. His eyes. No longer blue. Not brown. Not hazel. Just black. And smiling. Abram staggered backward from the mirror, his own reflection grinning with a smile he couldn't feel, a face he no longer trusted. His breath came short, rapid, cold against his lips. He blinked hard once, twice, but the smile remained, that same impossible arc stretching where it shouldn't. He clenched his fists, squeezed his eyes shut, and when he opened them again, his reflection was normal. Still him. Still Abram. Eyes blue, no smile. But the sense of being watched hadn't gone. Not from the corners of the tent, not from the edge of his thoughts. There was no sound, yet silence had weight now, pressing on him like hands from underneath the earth. He reached for the bundle on the stool with careful fingers. The bandages were clean, pressed, wrapped with deliberate care, just like the ones he'd removed from her. But these weren't stiff with soot or blood. They were new. No medical chart, no scribbled name. Just that one line. Please don't take them off again. He unwrapped them slowly. Nothing inside. No wound, no remnant, no hair or ash. Just the faintest scent of lavender, or maybe something older, like lilies left too long on a grave. He dropped them and stood quickly, the stool creaking behind him as he turned to the tent flap. He couldn't stay here, not in this place, not when the walls themselves seemed to breathe with some unseen thing. He stepped outside and was immediately struck by how quiet it had become. The blacksmith's forge wasn't clanging. The saloon's piano wasn't playing. The streets, minutes ago full of carts and boots and shouts, now sat still. Frozen. People stood but didn't move. Mid-step, mid-conversation. A man pouring water, the stream frozen mid-arc, a dog hovering mid-leap. As if the world had been paused. Except for him. And one other. Caroline. Standing at the far end of the street, hair hanging limp over her face, her dress once again singed at the hem. She raised her head. Her eyes met his. And she began to walk toward him. No sound, no echo of boots on dirt, just her figure moving slowly, steadily, closing the space between them with each impossible step. Abram tried to call her name, but his voice caught, throat dry and throat thick, as if something invisible gripped it. His knees buckled, but he forced himself upright. When she reached him, she stopped just inches away. Her face was pale, no longer covered in bandages, but it was wrong, half-formed, as though the skin had tried to heal in the shape of memory, not truth. Her mouth didn't quite align with her jaw. Her left eye twitched in place, lid never blinking. "Why didn't you listen?" she asked, voice more like wind than speech. He opened his mouth, and the sound that came out wasn't his. "Because I had to help you." Her head tilted. "Help," she echoed, "or see." Behind her, the townspeople began to move again. Not naturally, not with human rhythm. They all turned toward the doctor in perfect unison, heads snapping as if tugged by wires. Then they began walking. Toward him. Every single one. Even the children. Even the animals. He backed away, stumbled. Caroline stepped aside, allowing them through. "You opened the door," she said. "Now you have to shut it." "How?" he gasped. "You already know." Abram ran. Down alleys, through barns, across the creek that had once separated the schoolyard from the ridge. The sound of footsteps, hundreds followed, all two in sync, like one giant body made of many legs, many hands, one mind. The ridge rose before him, and at the top, where the Fletcher house once stood, now only a skeletal frame remained. The land blackened again, as it had the first time he saw it. Crows circled above, then stilled in the air like hung marionettes. He pushed through the scorched remains of the front door. And there, beneath the chimney's skeletal remains, sat Caroline's rocking chair. And in it, the same bundle of bandages. But this time it bled. Fresh. Soaking through the cloth like a heartbeat. A small note pinned atop, scrawled in childlike hand. "This time, don't open it." Behind him, the footsteps grew louder, the crowd approaching. He dropped to his knees before the chair. Tears welled unbidden. He didn't know why he cried, but grief isn't always about understanding. It just is. "What do I do?" he whispered. The air shimmered behind him. And the boy's voice returned. "You choose." The child now stood beside the chair, one hand hovering over the bleeding bandages. "Open it again and you'll know the truth, all of it, what she was, what you are, what I need. And if I do, then you'll forget, again, we'll reset, the town will sing, the crows will sleep, until the next time someone peels back the wrap and dares to look." The doctor's hand hovered above the bundle. Fingers shaking. Blood warm beneath the cloth. "Why her?" he asked. "Why this girl?" The boy smiled, not cruelly this time, almost sadly. "Because she never looked away, even when she should have." He stepped back. Caroline's voice called faintly through the wind, torn and fading. "Please don't take them off." The wind picked up. The crowd gathered outside the ruins, just beyond the threshold, unmoving, watching, waiting. Abraham's fingers curled, touched the edge of the top bandage, trembled. Then he stood, turned from the chair, and walked out, back into the ashes, back into the waiting crowd. As he crossed the threshold, each person blinked, just once, as if a spell had been broken. The world turned again. Sunlight filtered down, the crows flew off, the wind died. And the house behind him, gone. Nothing but grass. And silence. Back in his tent, hours later, Abram sat staring at his hands. There were flecks of ash still under his fingernails. The bundle hadn't followed him back. But the feeling did. Like a door still slightly ajar. And behind it, breathing. Abram didn't sleep that night, not fully. He sat upright in the tent's lone chair, arms folded over his chest, legs stretched toward the dying lantern. The flame flickered erratically, soft one minute, long the next, casting shadows that twisted along the canvas like they were trying to climb out. Outside, the town had returned to its quiet routine. Carts rolled by again. Hammers struck metal. The saloon's piano played out of tune, drunk fingers fumbling keys. But it all felt staged now. As if the town had remembered how to pretend normalcy, like an old puppet performing for no one. Abram stood and peeled back the tent flap. The morning sun hung high, but didn't warm his skin. He stepped outside and watched the townsfolk pass him by, each of them nodding in polite recognition, none of them mentioning what had happened the day before. Or maybe they didn't remember. Maybe he shouldn't remember either. But he did. The bandages, the child's voice, Caroline's face, half-formed and begging, the door that never fully closed. He had walked away. But walking away wasn't the same as sealing it shut. And he knew it. The unease didn't let him eat. It didn't let him read. It didn't let him focus when patients came in that morning with coughs, cuts, or complaints about the dust. He treated them all with the same distracted gentleness, the same faint smile. All the while, a single thought spiraled in the back of his skull like a worm curling deeper. She never looked away. What had she seen? And what had she become? He wasn't ready to answer that, but something else pressed at him, something he couldn't ignore anymore. The boy. That strange, soft-spoken child who knew too much, who walked where others couldn't, who left no footprints. Who was he? The name on the medical log was clear, Matthew J. Connors. No middle name, no birth date, but that name. It didn't sit right in Abram's mind. He remembered a Connors family once. Years ago, 2 boys, a daughter, a house on the North Ridge near the tree line. It had burned down. 7 years back. Everyone said it was a lightning strike. But no one had recovered bodies, no funerals, just whispers, then silence. He packed his bag and left town. The North Ridge had become overgrown, its old trail overtaken by creeping vines and fallen branches. No one had been this way in years, not on purpose. The air was heavier here, not from humidity or heat, but from memory. Every step felt like it crunched over something sacred, or cursed. He found the clearing easily. The charred remains were still there, hidden beneath layers of moss and weeds, but unmistakable. The porch steps, now warped, the skeletal frame of a stove pipe, a broken crib rail half buried in ash. Abram stood in the center of it all, closing his eyes, trying to imagine the fire, the screams, the moment the roof gave in. And then he opened his eyes again. And the boy was sitting there, cross-legged on the ground, picking at the grass. "You found it," he said, not looking up. Abram didn't speak. The boy plucked a small stick and snapped it in half, then again, until the pieces were too small to break. "You should have stayed away," the boy added. "It's easier when you don't know." "Who are you?" The boy finally looked up. His eyes were gray, not pale, not dark, just colorless, like stone worn by river water. "That's not the right question." "Then what is? Why did she burn?" Abram stepped forward. "Was it you?" The boy smiled faintly. She saw something she shouldn't, just like you. The house didn't like that. The house? The boy shrugged. That's what it was, or maybe it was her, or maybe the thing inside her, I don't know anymore. Maybe no one does. A breeze kicked through the clearing. It stirred the ash. Abram looked around, and for a moment, just a second, he saw the house whole. Fresh paint, a porch swing, smoke curling from the chimney, the laughter of children. And then it was gone. Ash again. The boy stood. You didn't open it, he said, but someone else will. What do you mean? You think this story ends with you. It doesn't. It loops, over and over, until someone makes the wrong choice, until someone pulls back the wrap. Abram's mouth was dry. Then how do we end it? The boy blinked. You already know. Same way you end a body that won't stop bleeding. Abram felt sick. You want me to? No, the boy interrupted. I want nothing. I'm just what's left after it takes what it wants. The wind shifted again. And when Abram looked back, the boy was gone. Back in town, things got worse. The patients started coming in again, but their wounds were strange. Old scars reopened, burns that hadn't touched flame. One woman's mouth was sewn shut with thread she swore hadn't been there when she woke. A child walked in with no shadow. No one noticed. No one but him. The world around them was fracturing, but the people inside it were blind. Except Caroline. She came again that night. He found her standing inside his tent, arms crossed tightly across her chest, eyes not bandaged, but raw, skin red and flaking like it had never healed. They're coming, she said, and this time they won't stop at me. Who? The ones behind the door, the ones you cracked open. Abram shook his head. I didn't do anything. I didn't let them out. You saw, that's enough. She stepped closer. You think mercy is kindness, but sometimes mercy is final. You could have ended it. You didn't. He tried to speak, but she vanished again mid-step. Just gone. The flame in his lantern died, even though the oil was full. The temperature dropped. From somewhere outside the tent, voices whispered, dozens of them, maybe more, all layered, all wrong. He stepped out and saw them. Figures, standing motionless in the street. No faces. No eyes. Just silhouettes made of stitched-together cloth and ash and bloodied gauze. Each one holding a bundle. Each one dripping. Caroline's voice rang in his ears. You could have ended it. He backed into the tent and found the same bundle waiting on his table. Same note. New words. Next time you won't walk away. The tent's walls pulsed. Not moved, not rustled, pulsed like the thin membrane of a dying lung struggling to expand. Abram pressed his back to the far end, eyes fixed on the bundle resting atop the examination table. He hadn't unwrapped it, couldn't, but the air around it was already wrong. Thick. Oily. The light above flickered again, not from a draft but from grief, the kind that suffocates sound and memory alike. His hand itched to grab the lantern, to run, to smash every glass bottle on the shelf just to feel something break. But none of that would matter now. He stepped forward anyway. Not because he was brave, but because someone had to do it. Whatever had walked into his tent, whatever had slithered through Caroline's body, through the eyes of the boy, through the ash of the house on the ridge, it wasn't finished. And neither was he. He reached for the bundle. The cloth was warm, damp, not with blood but something thicker. The smell hit first, copper and rot, and something faintly sweet like a flower blooming in the dark. His fingers trembled, but he pulled the string loose, unwrapping each fold as slowly as one might dig through a grave. Inside was a face. Not whole. Not human. A waxen imitation of one, a girl's perhaps, no more than 12, eyes closed, mouth stitched shut with a surgeon's precision, but even sealed, her lips curved upward into a smile. He staggered back. The smile widened. No movement, no muscle. Just more smile. From outside the tent came a slow, deliberate knock. Abram turned. He shouldn't have. The girl sat upright. He didn't see it happen. One second she was flat on the table, the next sitting, legs dangling, head tilted. Her smile never faltered, but her eyes were open now. Gray. The same stonewashed gray as the boy's. You didn't close the door, she said. Her voice was layered, not childlike, not demonic, something between, familiar and foreign all at once, like a lullaby sung in a wrong language. You never close the door, Abram. You leave it cracked like your lantern, like your heart. He couldn't move, not even when she slipped off the table, bare feet hitting the floor without a sound. Not even when she walked past him, brushed his arm, and pulled the tent flap open again. The street outside was empty, but only at first glance. Then the others appeared. Shadows of people, children mostly, some crawling, some slithering, all grinning with mouths they shouldn't have. The first girl stepped out and joined them, her arms folding like she'd been their mother all along. This is your gift, she said. You saw us, you get to join us. He ran. Not out the front. He tore open the back wall of the tent with a scalpel and pushed through crates and canvas and darkness until he stumbled onto the church steps. The building had been shuttered since spring. A fire took half the roof, but the bell tower still stood, still pointed toward something better. He slammed his fists against the doors. They opened before he hit the third time. An old man stood inside, bald, frail, but his eyes were clearer than any Abram had seen in weeks. You brought it with you, the man said quietly. Abram nodded, barely able to speak. I didn't mean. Meaning doesn't matter, but action does. The priest stepped aside. Abram entered. Inside, the pews were warped and scorched, candles long melted. The cross at the front had fallen sideways and was now propped up by a splintered bench, but the air felt still, not clean, but still. He dropped to his knees. Not to pray, to breathe. The priest watched him, then walked to a dusty cabinet near the altar. He opened it, revealing an old book, not a Bible but older looking, thicker, pages black at the edges. He flipped it open without reverence. You opened a door only meant to be knocked on. That child, Caroline, was a key. She wasn't meant to be touched. Abram shook his head. I didn't know. No, you didn't ask, that's worse. Lightning flashed outside, though the sky had been clear. The priest traced a line in the book with his finger. You think it's new, this curse? This rot? It's not. It's been here since before the ridgeline burned, since before Connors had a name, since before you were born. Abram stood. Then help me fix it. The priest's gaze didn't waver. There is no fixing, only sealing. You want to live, doctor. You want others to live. Abram nodded. Then you find the one who started it. Caroline. The priest laughed, but it wasn't cruel, it was exhausted, hollow. Caroline was a doorframe. The house was already there, she just walked in first. He closed the book. You need the boy. He's the last thing that can still choose, and he's not what you think. Finding him wasn't easy. But it didn't take long. That night Abram followed the path east, where the earth cracked and twisted, where the fences didn't line up, where the crows watched but didn't caw. He found the boy sitting on a well's edge, staring into the water like it owed him an answer. You shouldn't have come, the boy said. Abram didn't respond, just sat beside him. The boy looked smaller now, thinner, tired in a way no child should ever be. They're angry. I don't care, Abram said. You will. They sat in silence. After a long moment, Abram asked, What's in the well? The boy answered without looking. Everything that didn't stay buried. The thing about darkness is that once you see it clearly, it stops being afraid of you. The well opened wider. Not literally, but in the mind, in the memory. Abram blinked and they were both inside it. Cold stone walls spiraling up and up, too far to see the surface. The water didn't ripple, it hummed, like something ancient slept just inches below. And then it rose. Not water. Hands. Hundreds of them, pale, small, all grasping toward the rim, toward him. The boy stepped forward. You have to choose now. Choose what? To stay. Why would I? Because one man stays and the rest forget. One soul sinks and the rest get to sleep. You saw, you're the only one left who does. Abram backed away. No, no, there has to be another way. There was, the boy said quietly, but you took off the bandages. The hands reached. So many. Some wore rings, some were missing fingers, one pair clasped together in prayer, another reached for his throat. Caroline's voice echoed again. Please don't take off my bandages. But he had. He had. And now the world wanted something in return. The boy stepped into the water. You don't have to choose, I'll do it. Abram grabbed him. No. Why not? The boy whispered. Because you're just a child. Not anymore, he replied. You took that away. The well vanished. They were standing in the clearing again, the burned house, the ash. The boy was gone. Only the bundle remained, lying on the old porch silent. Abram didn't touch it. Didn't unwrap it. Just knelt beside it and wept. Somewhere far off, the church bell rang once. Abram didn't sleep that night. He sat in the remains of the porch where the boy had vanished, staring at the bundle. The wind had picked up, brushing dust into little spirals across the blackened floorboards. Coyotes howled from the west hills, but even they didn't come near the burned house. Not anymore. He hadn't moved since the bell. When morning came, it didn't feel like morning. The light had no warmth. The sun was a disk with no heart, and the world in that moment felt like it was pausing, waiting for something to be decided. He stood. The bundle still lay where it had been, untouched. He didn't dare open it again. Not because he feared what was inside, but because he feared what it meant. That he had become part of this, a thread in something larger, older, crueler than the land itself. Abram mounted his horse. He hadn't realized until then that it hadn't bolted during the night. It stood where he'd tied it, silent, unmoving, its eyes just slightly too wide, as if it too had seen. He turned the reins east, away from Connors, away from the well. But halfway down the trail, the road narrowed. A new trail split north, one that hadn't been there before. It was marked by a broken wheel, half buried in the dirt, and a string of feathers tied to a branch above. He paused, then turned the horse. He followed it. The trail led him to a grove he hadn't seen on any map. The trees were tall, dead, and swaying without wind. Beneath them were scraps, bandages, hundreds of them, some soaked, others dry, knotted like offerings. In the center was a wagon, or what was left of one. And beside it, a woman. She sat with her back to a stone, her dress torn in the sleeves, boots missing, one hand resting on her stomach as though trying to remember something that had been taken. I didn't know where else to go, she said without turning. Abram dismounted slowly. I don't know you. She turned then. He did know her. Caroline's mother. The resemblance was faint but unmistakable. Same cheekbones, same defiant tilt of the chin. They told me to run, she said, but the road loops. You can't leave the ridge not once you've seen. He approached carefully. Why are you here? She touched her temple, eyes dull. I remembered too much. The bandages helped at first. Her arms were covered in fresh wrappings, some tied with twine, some with frayed lace. All of them pressed tight against her skin, as though they were the only thing keeping her inside her own body. She came to me, the woman whispered, after the fire. Caroline. Yes, but not as a girl. Abram swallowed hard. What did she say? The woman smiled, but it was hollow. She said it would be quick, that I only had to hold her hand. She looked at her palm. It was blistered. I did. Then in a softer voice she said, but I never let go. The sun dipped behind a cloud. And for a moment the grove vanished. He stood in the middle of a vast plain with no wagon, no woman, no trees, only scorched earth stretching in every direction. But the bundle was still there at his feet. How it followed him, he'd stopped asking. He picked it up. It was lighter now. Almost empty. He didn't open it. Just held it to his chest and walked. By dusk, he reached the church again. The priest was waiting. Did you find her? The priest asked. Abram nodded. And did she remember? He didn't answer. The priest gestured him inside. This time the chapel was brighter. Candles were lit. A child hummed in the corner. The boy somehow returned, sitting by a basin of water, dipping his fingers in and out like he was trying to feel something that had no shape. He came back before you, the priest explained. But something's different now. He doesn't speak. He doesn't look. He just listens. Abram stepped forward. The boy didn't blink. Didn't flinch. He's waiting for you, the priest said. For what? To finish it. The bundle weighed heavier again. Not in mass, but in meaning. Abram set it on the altar. His fingers hovered over the twine. The priest spoke, voice low and grave. If you open it here, it won't close again. The church is the last place they respect. Abram looked at the boy. Then back to the bundle. What if I don't open it? Then it opens itself, somewhere darker, somewhere you won't be able to follow. The silence between them lasted a minute. Then two. Then Abram unwrapped the first fold. Inside was hair, soft, dark, braided. Then a dress hem, stitched with a pattern he remembered from his childhood, a symbol embroidered into the trim. An eye. Wide open. It was Caroline. It was her mother. Her name wasn't spoken, hadn't been recorded, but now her presence filled the chapel like wind before a storm. The priest stepped back. The candles dimmed. The boy stood. She never let go, the boy said softly. Let go of what? Abram asked. Of us. The chapel groaned. Not from age, but from memory. From the weight of too many stories told wrong. The stained glass window cracked. A scream erupted, not from a throat, but from every stone in the walls. The bundle burst open on its own. From inside poured a flood of light, but not warm, not holy. It scorched the air as it moved, peeling bark from wood, cracking stone, hissing like breath pulled backward. The priest fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The boy turned to Abram. You started it, now you finish it. The light surrounded him. And within it he saw faces. Dozens. Hundreds. All the children who had vanished from Connors over the years, not buried, not lost, trapped. Frozen in that moment, before someone removed their bandages. They spoke in unison. Please do. Don't take them off. It hurts. It shows too much. It lets them in. Abram screamed. Not in fear, but in grief. Because he realized then. He had been the first. Not Caroline. Not the boy. Him. Years ago, as a child, he'd been found on the edge of Connors, burned, wrapped in white cloth with no memory. The doctor who raised him had said nothing of it, had told him he'd been rescued from a fire. But the claws, the bandages, he was the beginning. And he'd forgotten. The light swallowed him whole. He woke to silence. The chapel was empty. The boy was gone. The bundle ash. Only the symbol remained, burned into the altar wood, the eye always watching, never closed. The priest's robes lay, folded beside the basin. And the wind outside had stopped. Abram walked out of the chapel, but the town of Connors didn't meet him. There was no windmill. No general store. No road. Just silence and fog, dense and unmoving, curling around him like bandages. And not the fog of weather, memory fog. The kind that crept in when truth had been cut away too many times. He looked back. The chapel was gone. So was the ridge. Even the sun. All that remained was a dull red glow above him, like a lantern behind smoke, and a sound, low, almost like breathing. Or maybe a whisper too faint to understand. He turned in a slow circle. Then he heard it again. Please. Please don't take them off. A figure stood just ahead in the mist, small still. The boy. Or a boy. But now he wore the bandages, head to toe, wrapped in linen aged like parchment, hands loosely at his sides, eyes just barely visible beneath the folds. He didn't move. "Why are you here?" Abram asked. No answer. "Is this where it ends?" The boy tilted his head, then slowly raised one hand and pointed. Behind Abram. He turned and saw the well. It hadn't been there a moment ago, but now it stood 10 feet away, rope swinging slightly as if someone had just dropped a bucket down. Its stones were wet with condensation, slick with moss that hadn't been alive for decades. Abram stepped forward. The bandaged boy didn't follow. The well had no wind, no echo, just darkness. But this wasn't the first time he'd seen it. And somewhere in the depths of his own stolen memories, he realized. This was where it had all started. Where the cloth had first been wrapped around his arms. Where the screams had been muffled by cotton soaked in oil. Where a hand had stroked his head and whispered, "You'll forget. It's better that way." He gripped the rope and began to pull. It resisted him at first, heavy, ancient, but then something gave way and the rope rose foot by foot, creaking like old bone. Water dripped, then steam, then something else, a sound like tearing paper and a gasp from lungs that hadn't drawn breath in years. At last the bucket emerged. But it didn't hold water. It held a face. Wrapped tight. Eyes wide. And mouth open, not screaming but smiling. Caroline. Not the girl who had asked him for help. But the original. The source. She opened her eyes and looked right through him. "You saw too much," she whispered. "You remembered." He fell back. But the well kept rising. Stone by stone, like it had been growing from underground, taller and taller, reshaping into a spire, a tower of twisted rock and soot, its top branching into wooden crosses like a cathedral from a fevered dream. Figures emerged from the mist. All wrapped. All silent. They gathered around the base of the spire like mourners. Their bandages fluttered. And the fog began to peel away, revealing not just the tower but the valley below it. And there, nestled between crags under a blood-colored sky, was Connors. Unburned. Alive. Bustling with people. But none of them looked up. None of them saw the tower above them or the children watching from behind linen veils. They laughed, worked, drank from wells. They lived blind. Just like he had. Until someone took off the bandages. The boy appeared beside Abram again. He looked up at the spire. "Will you go back?" he asked. Abram said nothing. "You can if you want, but you'll remember." And they woe. The boy shook his head. They never remember. Not even Caroline. The boy smiled faintly. "Which one?" And that was when Abram saw her. At the base of the tower, near the stone steps. Not a ghost, not a memory. But Caroline alive. Bandages gone. Eyes clear. She looked older now, no longer a child but not quite grown, as if her body had been kept in limbo and was just now catching up. She saw him. And ran. They met halfway. He dropped to his knees and held her, really held her, flesh to flesh, no wrappings, no linen barrier, just a heartbeat, fast and real. "You came back," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go. I thought it'd be worse." "It is." She pulled away slightly, eyes narrowing. "But not for long." She looked back at the spire. "It's crumbling." And she was right. Now that he looked closer, the base had started to fracture. Cracks split along the stone, bleeding not dust or water but light, gentle, soft. The kind of light he hadn't seen since childhood. The boy stepped up beside them. "You broke it," he said to Abram, "by remembering. That's all it takes." The boy looked at Caroline. "No, she let you remember." Abram turned to her. "Why?" "Because someone had to." The tower cracked louder now. Stones fell in slow arcs like feathers. The ground beneath them rumbled, but not violently, like a storm passing, like something being released. Figures in bandages looked up. And for the first time, they removed the wrappings from their eyes. They cried. Silently. Tears fell, not just from them, but from the spire itself, dripping down like silver onto the valley below. And for the first time in decades, the people in Connors looked up. A child dropped his toy. A woman froze mid-step. A preacher stopped mid-sermon. They all raised their faces to the sky as the spire burned with light and vanished. Not exploded. Not crumbled. Vanished. Abram stood at the edge of the ridge. Caroline held his hand. The boy was gone. And Connors below them began to shift, not in shape but in tone, like the dust had cleared from the windows, like the air had let go of something old. The doctor's home still stood. So did the chapel. But now he remembered them for what they were, places of denial, places that protected people from truths they weren't strong enough to bear. Until now. Will they forget again? Caroline asked. Maybe, Abram said, but not all of them. Then what do we do? He squeezed her hand. We stay close. And the boy? Abram looked toward the well, now filled in, sealed with stone and marked with a symbol, the eye, but this time it was closed. He's free, Abram said. Like us. Not yet, but he's closer. Night came. But no fog followed. No bells. No bandages. Only stars. Abram and Caroline walked down into Connors, past the homes, past the post. People turned to stare, some recognizing him, others not sure why their hearts ached at the sight. A little girl pointed at Caroline. You were gone, she said. Everyone said you burned. Caroline smiled. Not quite. Where did you go? Caroline looked at Abram. Then back at the girl. Far but not far enough. The girl nodded solemnly. I'm glad you came back. They reached the doctor's door. It was closed. Abram knocked once. And this time he waited. A moment later it opened. The doctor stood there, older, eyes more tired than before, but his hands were clean, his apron gone. He looked at Abram. Then at Caroline. Then stepped aside. You're home, he said. Abram nodded. For now. The door shut behind them. And for the first time in too long, there was peace. Not silence. Not forgetting. But peace born of truth. Of remembering. Of bandages removed. And the scars they'd covered finally allowed to breathe. But peace, as it turned out, was not an ending, just a breath between storms. Because 3 days after the tower vanished and the last of the fog cleared from Connors, Abram found something he couldn't explain. A letter slid under the door during the night. No name, no return address, just a symbol scrawled across the wax seal, the closed eye. Caroline sat beside him at the table as he broke it open. No paper inside. Only a strip of cloth. Old. Frayed. Wrapped around a single line of handwriting. There are more. Caroline's eyes met his. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They packed that night. Not in fear, but with purpose, with the weight of something unfinished, not a curse, not a mystery. A calling. Because Connors had been just one place. One well. One spire. But what if there were more? What if the children, wrapped in bandages, weren't all set free? They left before sunrise. No one stopped them. Some watched. Some wept. Some simply nodded. The doctor handed Abram a tin of salve and a faded photograph of a town he didn't recognize. Found it tucked behind my shelf last night, he said. Didn't know it was there. You think it's real. I didn't think any of this was real, so yeah, I think it's waiting. Caroline sat on the back of the wagon, eyes scanning the horizon. She wore no bandages now, just a scarf to keep the dust from her face. But under that scarf was someone reborn, no longer just a girl who'd survived. Now a girl who could fight. Abram took the reins. The road was cracked, but open. And in the distance, beyond the ridge, something shimmered, a faint flicker of smoke or maybe fog. He'd seen that shape before. Not in memory. In dreams. The wheel hit a rut and jolted them forward. Caroline laughed softly. Where do we go if the trail disappears? Abram smiled. We find another. And if the fog comes back? He tightened his grip on the reins. Then we walk through it, eyes open this time. She leaned against the side of the wagon, watching the hills roll past like old wounds healed just enough to keep moving. And for a long while they didn't speak. But just as they passed a half-buried signpost, one carved with symbols that didn't belong to any known tongue, Caroline murmured, I remember something else. From before. From deeper, before the bandages, before the chapel. Abram turned slightly. What is it? She hesitated. Then, with a voice that trembled from weight, not fear. They weren't trying to hurt us. Then why wrap you in cloth? To hide us. From who? She looked toward the west. From something worse. That night they camped near a dry riverbed. The moon hung low, casting a pale silver over the rocks. Caroline sat beside the fire, sketching the tower from memory with charcoal. Abram sharpened a knife. Neither spoke for a long while. Then she held up the drawing. Do you think it'll find us again? He studied the image. It wasn't just a tower. Now he saw faces in it. Not screaming, not angry.